All right, so what more do I need to show you? What more do you need to hear to finally realize what we've been telling you for a long time? That Zimbabwe, and indeed, let me be specific, ZANU-PF are the monsters that we've been telling you that they are. The monsters who will never give up power. That country had a sham election. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good day, good day, good day. My name is Sihle Ngobese, and you're watching the Vuka Nazo Show, where we provide news analysis in a short, condensed format. Now, I'm going to hop straight into this one because it is the topical news for likely the week. It will be a developing story that is to our neighbors in the north, is Zimbabwe, where, of course, the absolute sham that is the elections that happened there is now playing itself out, with the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission having come out and rather hastily announced the results of the Zimbabwean elections. Of course, the results of that, if I quickly go to this piece by ENCA, were as follows. Now, the announcement by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, of course, you remember those announcements were done by a Justice Chigumba, said the victory for President Emmerson Mnangagwa was announced, where it says he garnered over 52% of the vote against the opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, who is said to have only gotten 44%. End of quote. Now, you can imagine that this entire thing rings as an absolute scam, given the allegations of effectively voter intimidation, vote rigging, voter suppression that happened throughout this. The very election observers who were in that part of the world from various quarters, whether it's the European Union election observers, or of course even closer to home, the South African Development Community or SADC election observers, saying this election is far from being free and fair. Let me jump to an EWN piece which gives those two bodies' views on this particular election. Indeed, meanwhile, the elections came under heavy scrutiny by international observers, with the European Union's observer mission saying that, quote, the voting took place in a climate of fear, whilst the South African Development Community mission said there were a, quote, number of issues during voting, including the banning of rallies, biased media coverage, and voting delays, end of quote. Now, as to how this can be called a free and fair election, baffles the mind. Indeed, you have some asinine Zimbabwean influencers on social media trying to convince you that this election is absolutely legitimate. They're saying, just look at how President Mnangagwa is so happy. And even he's saying, they're telling us, that the election was super fair. In fact, this is what President Mnangagwa said about this election.
Can I assure you that I did not conduct the elections? I competed with them in this race to win the elections, and I'm happy that I've won the race. I think those who feel the race was not run properly should know where to go to complain. I'm so happy that the race was run peacefully, transparently, and fairly, broad daylight. And I'm happy that there was huge turnout by our people. I'm sure that very few people in this country will say that the elections were marred by any violence, because there was no violence at all.
Yes, you can absolutely see how happy he is in that particular little video. Indeed, he's almost like a pig in a pigsty, super happy as he rolls in the mud and filth of what the Zimbabwean election really was. And indeed, the opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, who of course leads the party called the Citizens Coalition for Change, or CCC, has indicated that he will challenge these particular sham results, as he put them. These were his comments.
There is going to be change in Zimbabwe. Whether ZANU-PF people want it or not, it's not going to be easy, but there shall be change. We will not wait for 5 years. There has to be change now. And we are going to lead in making sure that change comes to Zimbabwe. We put a full stop to this madness. Whatever it takes, we must provide leadership. Mr. Mnangagwa knows that he has performed a coup since 2008, a coup on the ballot, 2017, a coup on the elected leader, 2018, a coup on the ballot. He has repeated again, 2023, a coup on the ballot. You can't survive this for far too many times. This time, no further. We've drawn a line in the sand. We will not allow you to abuse people. You are not the last Zimbabwean. You are not the only Zimbabwean. We are all Zimbabweans. We all count. We all matter. And we will make sure we take our stand and we defend democracy.
Again, you can hear the resolve here of an individual who's basically saying enough with the nonsense, enough with this absolute sham of a democracy that is Zimbabwe, and enough of listening to these various influencers, whether they're in the political sphere, the media sphere, or even social media, who basically rubber stamp the nonsense that happens in Zimbabwe. And that's a very dangerous development. Zimbabwe gives us a very good look as to what could happen in South Africa if the ANC were to decide to act like ZANU-PF. And by the way, you've got to understand something. The ANC looks at Zimbabwe and actually smiles. It's why they've never really been critical of the shenanigans that happened there, because they look at Zimbabwe and they smile. And why? Because ZANU-PF represents exactly what the ANC would want to be, where if it lost an election, it could just stay on and either use force and violence, as was the case before in Zimbabwe, where you've got to remember, Mnangagwa actually entered into power off of a coup. Off of a coup, ironically, on a government that in itself had got into power through vote rigging and allegations of that and the suppression of opposition. Zimbabwe is an absolute mess, and it's a mess which the rest of us in the SADC region and indeed in other parts of the world are paying the cost of, whether it's the flood of illegal immigrants that come here or any other of the issues of dealing with a economy in our region that is simply sluggish. Something has to be done about this, and the South African government in particular cannot keep silent, especially when SADC has very bravely come out and said that that election cannot be accepted. We're going to keep an eye on the story, and I'll give you updates as they happen, as we keep an eye, as I said, on the Zimbabwean election.